Greetings, my scattered sisters and brothers in the Lord. Trust you know the Lord is with you wherever you find yourself scattered today, and that you know that His presence with you is more than enough for whatever you might face today. Well, we are continuing on with Jesus. It happens to be a Sabbath day, and Jesus and His disciples are passing through a grain field. We read about this in Mark chapter 2, beginning at verse 23. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and His disciples walked along. They began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees said to Him, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" So the Sabbath was supposed to be a day of rest, and plucking heads of grain was considered work. And so Jesus' disciples, they are breaking Sabbath. Here's Jesus' answer. He answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, 'The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.'" Now, this is all pretty interesting, and it may take us a couple of sessions to kind of think through it or work through it. I know that my tendency would be to kind of jump the part about Jesus reminding them about David and just saying, look, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So if I'm picking lemons and it happens to be, the Sabbath, or, for Christians, it happens to be Sunday, Resurrection Day, and somebody says, "Why are you picking lemons on Resurrection Day, on Sunday? You should be resting, you should be honoring God." And I might say something like, "Well, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Plus, I'm going to give them to friends at church." Something like that. I probably wouldn't jump to David did this, okay? And I probably wouldn't even jump, to, well, Jesus' disciples, they pick grain on the Sabbath. I mean, I might go there, but why does Jesus go to this story about David? I mean, what's the point of that? Why not just say, look, man, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath? In asking them and reminding them, have you never read about David, what he did when he was hungry and his men were hungry, and how he went to the priest and he ate the bread that was consecrated to God? Nobody condemned David for that, all right? By Jesus going there, Jesus is comparing himself to David. In other words, Jesus is trying to give the Pharisees a clue as to who he is, that he is like David. He is greater than David. And so by bringing this story up, it's found in 1 Samuel, I think, chapter 22, Jesus is automatically beginning to make a comparison between himself and David, trying to give the Pharisees a clue as to who he is, that he's the son of David, that he's the Messiah, that he's the coming king. It's also interesting that David doesn't just take the bread for himself. David takes the bread and shares it with his troops, with those who are with him, with his men. Jesus kind of doing the same thing, using his authority for his men, using his authority for his disciples. Maybe one more point of comparison. At this point, David is not yet king. David has been anointed king, but Saul is still the king. And the reason why David is, entering into or talking to the priest about, do you have any bread? All I have is this bread that's consecrated to God. Well, it's because Saul is pursuing him. Saul will not accept him. David is kind of the new kingdom coming in. Saul is a part of the old kingdom. And so Saul is against David and against his men. Are you seeing the comparison? Jesus, the new kingdom coming in with his disciples. And just as Saul was against David and making it very difficult for David and not wanting to accept that David was the new king, so the Pharisees are against Jesus. And they're refusing to recognize that Jesus is the new king, the coming king, the promised king, the son of David. And here are Jesus' disciples with him, just as David's men were with him. And so this whole thing is really not just about, the Sabbath. Jesus takes it from there and he turns it into a lesson about who he is, about his authority, that he's the new king, that he is the son of David. And the question is, are you going to recognize that Jesus is the king and accept him? Or are you going to be basically like Saul, holding on to your own power and refusing to recognize what God is doing in Jesus, the coming king, the new king? We'll talk more about the Sabbath next time in particular, but today, that's what we need to consider. Are we recognizing that Jesus is the coming king and that we need to receive him? Or are we resistant, just as Saul was resistant to David, just as the Pharisees are being resistant to Jesus? May God help us to let go of our resistance and to be fully accepting, embracing of Jesus, recognizing that he is the king. He is the one who is worthy of our lives, of our service, of our trust, of our devotion. God bless. Have a great day. Recognize who Jesus is.